The How to Train Your Dragon live action remake is easily the most faithful live action remake that I've seen of any of the animated movies. I think for the normal audience, they'll think it's identical to the first one. They're going to love it. It'll probably make like $800 million and they'll greenlight both the sequels. There are changes throughout the movie that are pretty subtle if you haven't rewatched the original recently. Before I even get into it, I'll just say I find the idea that these movies need a live action version because animated movies are a lesser form of media ridiculous. I think the idea that it's movies above animated or books or comics or video games is absurd. All the mediums have their different purposes and strengths, and it really irritates me that these live action remakes keep getting made. One, because they're usually soulless and worse. And two, just because I think it really locks into the culture the idea that animated things are for children. For the good movies, you can still enjoy them as an adult. And that doesn't even get into things like Family Guy and South Park existing. That said, the movie to me feels like the original creator said, okay, I'm going to do a 1-to-1 remake. And the studio said, you can do that, but here's some notes that you need to include. Broadly speaking, it feels like when they want to redo an older movie, they do the whole thing where they say they need to remake it for modern audiences. And these changes tend to be a malignant tumor on every single one of these things, where you can tell they've just stuck their ideology into the story. They didn't understand it, and it completely butchers the entire thing. This movie, I would say, is more like a benign tumor. The changes are there if you're aware of them. They're enough for people who pay close attention to be annoyed. But overall, you're essentially getting the same movie as the animated version. Personally, I would say just go watch the animated version. But that said, as far as the live action goes, I thought the visual effects were really good. The dialogue, the camera angles, a lot of it was straight from the original. The casting was really hit and miss. Obviously, you have Gerard Butler, who voiced Stoic, playing Stoic. He nailed it. The kid who played Hiccup mostly did a good job. But one of the problems with going from animated to live action is when you have an animated movie, you can do really crazy facial expressions or really exaggerated expressions and get away with things that are a little bit more ridiculous. And it's a bit more over the top, but usually in a pretty charming and endearing way. So everything in this movie feels much more subdued. One of the areas to me where it was most noticeable was Toothless. For me, Toothless is one of the funniest parts of the original. He's very expressive. His body language is kind of all over the place. And they mimic a lot of it in the live action, but you can tell because they're trying to maintain the realism, certain things have to be toned down. And this is just rippled all throughout the movie, humans and dragons alike. I thought the sets looked great. The costumes looked great. You can tell the amount of detail and care they put into it. They did everything within their power to just recreate the original, recapture the lightning in a bottle again. Obviously, they reused the music. The learning to fly scene is extremely well done. There's just something about it being muted and on a more meta level, knowing that it's a soulless cash grab is completely unnecessary, that sort of takes away from the movie. For me at least. Continuing with the cast, it's kind of a bizarre thing the movie does. Astrid was one of the worst parts of the movie to me. The kind of race swapping aside, for those of you who don't know, she's a Nepo baby. Her mother is Tandui Newton. Don't know if I said the name right. You would recognize her from Westworld or Mission Impossible or many other things. And Astrid is just a charisma black hole. And I don't want to be too hard on her because she's a pretty young actress, but the voice acting for Astrid, the facial expressions, all those things in the animated movie do a really great job of conveying kind of her frustration and jealousy that turns into her feelings for Hiccup and Toothless. And those moments just kind of fall flat with her. Another odd casting choice was Tough Nut. This is the guy that played Mog in The Acolyte, and nothing against the dude. Without looking at anything, I'm assuming he's gay. I don't care, but the role is a dumb Viking, and he comes across as like a retarded flaming Viking, and it's kind of distracting. And beyond casting, getting into the actual changes in the movie. In the beginning, there's a scene where all the Vikings are standing around the table, and you're like, wow, this is a really diverse group of Vikings. And Stoic has to go out of his way to walk up to each of the minority Vikings and be like, oh, the Asian one, you came from the eastern lands far away. The Hispanic one, you came from the temperate area. The black one, you came from the hot place. So they have this line of dialogue just to save the world building, because the creator understands that in a fantasy world where travel is not easy, you're going to have racially homogenous societies, and this never comes up again. So for the pro-diversity crowd, I actually found this more offensive, because it's like, oh, here's our checklist. Let's quickly justify this in the world building, and then none of you will ever be relevant again. And it's just so transparent what they're doing. Obviously, the relationship between Stoic and Hiccup is really complicated. Hiccup is going through his phase as a teenager where he wants to conform, and a huge part of his arc is becoming an individual and really fulfilling his potential in a different way than what the Vikings expect. And obviously, his dad accepting him for who he is. You know, when you get Gerard Butler and it's not a role that just feels like he's paying off his acting school loans, he does put in a good performance. A lot of aspects of the movie, they do really nail it. But the biggest changes in the movie, very unsurprisingly, revolve around Astrid. And like I said, they're not huge things that are going to ruin the movie. But for me, I found it annoying, mainly due to the fact that I think it undercuts Hiccup's story. And it is his story in Toothless. Like, yeah, there's a lot of supporting characters. There's a lot of characters that are very relevant to the story and have their own things going on. But these changes with Astrid start very early. One of these is when Hiccup is left alone with her and the book about dragons. In the original, she goes, read it, and just walked away because she's annoyed by him. She thinks she's too good to be there. In this movie, she sits down and talks about how privileged he is and how she came from nothing. And he half-assed mentioned that maybe not all dragons are bad. And she's like, you're crazy. And all of this leads nowhere. It serves no purpose. Then later on in the movie, after Hiccup has won the trials and he's supposed to kill a dragon, in the original, when she talks to him in the tunnel, he says, if anything happens to me, please don't let them find Toothless. So even as he's walking to his death, he's still worried about Toothless, which is a really important moment for his character, broadly speaking, and then especially as the movies go on. In this one, he says, no, you stay out of it. Don't let anything happen to yourself. My dad respects you too much. And this is just reiterated throughout the movie that she's respected, she's the best. And it feels really clunky. And I think it actually does take away from Hiccup's character and his arc, which is the primary focus of the story. And then the last big change with Astrid is when they go into the final fight. In the original movie, this is really the culmination of Hiccup's arc, from wanting to conform, being looked down on as the loser, finding his own path, and developing confidence and becoming comfortable with who he is. And that originality allows him to develop into the one to lead them into battle, because he has the most experience flying dragons. In this, he gets another line about how, Astrid, you're the best among us, or you're the most respected among us. You lead us in battle. So then he kind of rides bitch, and she gives out all the orders in this movie that he gave out in the original. So again, nothing like world shattering. It just all feels like it chips away at the original intent of the arc and Hiccup's development. And then, of course, there's a dumb little change in there where the giant dragon bites her dragon's tail, so she hops into its mouth and hacks some teeth out until it coughs her up, and then Toothless catches her, as opposed to the original where she was trying to get away. Toothless shoots into the big dragon's mouth, and it causes an explosion that causes her to fall off her dragon, at which point Toothless catches her. Just little shit like that. They got rid of a little bit of the foreshadowing about the inside of the dragons not being protected from fire, like where the little dragon tries to steal Toothless fish, and he just blows a little bit of fire into its mouth and it pisses off. And the last thing I'll say is this weird thing where they wanted to include racial diversity in a Viking village. They had to modify the plot to where it's like the whole world is coming together to try to find this dragon nest, which immediately doesn't make the world make sense, really, as if the dragons are flying all around the world to feed the big dragon, when that makes no sense at all. So like I said, nothing super damaging. It really is as close to a one-to-one adaptation as I think we're going to get anytime soon. But if you're a person who pays attention, the bullshit is still there. And it really did just feel like some producer's notes of, hey, you need to include these things or we're going to take the project from you. Because a lot of it is completely irrelevant. It gets brought up briefly and then pisses off. Overall, I think this is the best we can hope for live. Overall, I think this is the best that we can hope for live action adaptations. I think, unfortunately, the lesson that they learn is just, copy the originals and slip some small shit in, and they'll just print money. And we'll be stuck with a live action adaptation of everything that's probably a lesser version of the original and an insult to the idea that animated movies need remakes to begin with. I'm going to leave it there for this one. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. I try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.